Yes, I am guest lecturing at the moment, so not too many statistical analyses going on there. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. I think I'd be leading a lot of people astray, although I do help people kind of consider Indigenous perspectives and centre Indigenous knowledges into their um, units. So I was just
Great.
working with the person here at QUT who was lecturing into qualitative methodologies in the research methods. So we worked very hard to incorporate a bit more of our ways of knowing, being educating into
Mhm.
those, embedding it a bit more and not keeping it so separate at the end of each paragraph, at the end of each week. And so that was really fun and good to see that it was well received from what I hear.
Yeah.
And
Great.
then in my research, I use a lot of mixed methods depending on the population. Um, when you're going to community with mob, it is more about that yarning, that making sure that we're connecting relationally first to build that trust and
Mm.
that understanding of how each person fits into community, and then from there, going on a journey together to explore the topic. Whereas, for my PhD, I just released a paper that surveyed psychologists. So, despite some psychologists being Aboriginal, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to then go yarn with those specific psychologists and then give a survey to everybody else. So that was a much more effective way to explore the data and the findings by using a survey. So I think it's really important to work towards your population.
Yeah. And I think like some of the guys at UQ, depending on what level this video is shown in, might not even know what qual methods are. Can you describe a bit about qualitative methods and the range of things you can do in qual?
Ugh. Um,
Or I could.
yeah, I think you'd be probably a better place to do that.
Well, I would say, and correct me from your perspective, right? Like it includes interviews, which are, commonly analyzed with things like thematic analysis, which is when you read through the interview and pick out key themes. And then there's content analysis, where you kind of go through and look for sometimes like quite quantified things like counting the number of action words or how many times people say I and we. And then there's what they call discourse analysis, which takes what people say and looks for stories and narratives within it. And that approach also extends into analysis of like, traditional media and social media. So what do people say on social media about The Voice and things like that? Or, how are people relating to each other about the Trump assassination attempt that just happened as we recorded a couple of days ago? So those are some qual methods. And they are very appropriate to psychology, even though they're not emphasized very much in undergrad, at least here at UQ.
Yeah, I definitely think they've got an important place in psychology because you do get so much more deep and robust understanding of the context behind the the point that they're making rather than just clicking yes no to an answer.
Yeah.
So I mainly use like regression based statistics and um, like survey based methodologies. So two of the big projects that I have at the moment are two like nationally representative longitudinal samples where we've asked like 3,000 Australians about a bunch of different things in one study related to their social class and their health and some different social factors. And another looking at, we collected some data just before and just after and a few months following the Voice referendum and looking at attitudes of non-Indigenous Australians. And so the methods I tend to use are that sort of survey-based, looking at mediation and moderation. How do these variables predict one another over time? How do they behave over time? How does time play into those variables as a factor and things like that? I do occasionally do some experimental research as well, but I would say largely it's very survey based.
There was research done, it was in the 60s. They started to come to the realisation, and I found this fascinating, that where you live influences the paradigm in which you work, your view.
Yeah.
For example, they looked at people's views on the world who lived in Iceland. They looked at, the horizons were never ending. They were more open, more approachable. They took in a lot more could be there because their world was big. And conversely, if you research someone who lived in Holland in a small thing there, they were very focused on their environment, and everything had to be very detailed. So, whether you're an Aboriginal person, this is what we need to think about. Whether you're an Aboriginal person living in the forest, you're a different person than a person living by the sea or in the mountains or in the desert. And an urban person is different from a regional rural person on how they think. When you go to the Brisbane Ekka, our national show, you will see the people who come from the bush with the felt hat and the corks, etc. They will stand a further distance from other people.
It's true, yeah.
Yes. And so all of these things have to come into our mind when we're developing our questions and our thesis. There's so much more. So what I would advocate is that whenever you're developing those questions and, your research questions, have a person who actually comes from that cohort be with you.
Yeah.
And because not only the way we think changes, but the meaning of words change as well. I found that when I was doing some work with, I was setting up regional aid teams when AIDS came out. And I had quite a few different disciplines. Like I had police there, I had healthcare workers, I had et cetera, right? And when we would say one word about something, would start to arc up with it. Hang on, what's your problem with that? It meant an entirely different thing to the police than it did to the health, to the doctors.
Yeah.
I know it sounds intricate, but it's really important that you think about those sort of things when you're developing your questions. And so working with somebody from that community or from there as you develop that, and then reflecting it, back to them, how does that sound to you? What would you have a problem with that, etc., is really important. Yeah.